may I say, with everything you've done, everything you've been through, what have you got to lose by being open to it? You know, so quite often we do have to give them the freedom to have that skepticalness. Not that that's a word, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So number one, Sammie will detox the energy. And yes, she can do this whether you are sitting in front of her or perhaps if you are simply, you know, sharing with her your intention. And there may be elements of like a picture. I've heard people I know Joe Dispenza does it, like a picture of the person and, you know, sending that energy to them. So what was happening in your life, Sammie, before you decided to go on this crusade of becoming this beautiful, intuitive and spiritual healer and just this person that's making such an incredible difference in people's lives?
So right before I started doing this, I kind of had my complete breakdown. I just been through so much stuff for so many years and had so much anger built up and was not me anymore. I couldn't keep a job anymore and was just really miserable. And yeah, so I ended up working through that and getting a lot better, and that led me to this.
Wow, that's amazing.
My name is Terri Messenger, and I am
Hey, and welcome to Terri Messenger's Genius Zone. And, you know, this is the place and the space where you are going to get your own free masterclass, absolutely free.
Rock and roll. Hello, and welcome, Sammie. Hi, welcome to Terri Messenger's Genius Zone.
Hi, so excited to be here.
I am so excited to have you here, Sammie. And of course, let's firstly just talk about the reason that we bring people like you on the show is to really illustrate what happens to a person when they have been through so many trials in their life, when they have had so many struggles, and, you know, what they do to overcome it. More importantly, how that converts into your purpose and passion and power. Now, obviously, you know your client very well because now here you are, an intuitive, Reiki, spiritual, lifestyle coach that has all of these amazing gifts. And we're going to talk about how you heal people even when you're not right in front of them or when they're not physically in front of you. So we're going to go through this and we're going to really explore some incredible tools that is going to help people on their journey from wherever they are. If they're feeling like they are angry, they're triggered, they're not happy in their life. But let's talk about you. Let's talk about Sammie and find out where all of this came from. So what was happening in your life, Sammie, before you decided to go on this crusade of becoming this beautiful, intuitive and spiritual healer and just this person that's making such an incredible difference in people's lives?
So right before I started doing this, I kind of had my complete breakdown. I just been through so much stuff for so many years and had so much anger built up and just was not me anymore. I couldn't keep a job anymore and was just really miserable. And yeah, so I ended up working through that and getting a lot better, and that led me to this.
Wow, that's amazing. So what do you feel that happened? Because if you couldn't hold a job down and you were in a position where obviously you were doing things that were, obviously not what you wanted, where were you in yourself? Were you feeling like you just had no self-esteem? Had you had, like childhood trauma or teenage trauma? Let's look at where the beginnings came from.
So it definitely started in my younger teenage years, and then let up for a little bit and got really bad again. So it's been all over the place a bit. But my first experiences started when I was 13.
Okay, so as a 13-year-old girl, what are you willing to share?
Oh, I am good with sharing anything. So, basically, my stepdad molested me, and my mom was not on my side at all. So
Right.
it was not only going through that with my stepdad, it was also isolation because they took me out of school. I wasn't even allowed to go to youth group at church. Like, I had to sit
Wow.
with them if we were at church. And I guess that was him isolating me so I couldn't say anything or something, not really sure. But, that was probably the hardest part was the isolation. But, I ran away and the police were just like, "Oh, you have such a great dad," because he, legally spent the money to adopt me and everything. And so I didn't even say anything then because I was like, "Okay, they're not gonna believe me." And then my mom didn't believe me for a long time. So that was just, a whole bunch of different directions of pain, of not having security and not being
Yeah.
believed and, having no one there to protect me.
That's just crazy. I mean, crazy when you think of it, because I mean, you hear of this happening a lot, where there is abuse going on in the family home, and in that, in all of that trauma, there is one party that is the abuser, and then the other party kind of turns a blind eye to it. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it makes you wonder what makes people actually turn a blind eye to their own flesh and blood when their own flesh and blood are suffering. And for those people that are out there, you may be adults, but the thing is that obviously, if you've got these experiences that are harbored within you, it then manifests and turns into something. As you're growing up, it affects your self-esteem, it affects the way you do life, the way you communicate, your relationships. So tell us firstly, how did some of the trauma that you battled, and obviously I can hear that, you were put into a position where you felt helpless, where you were abandoned. And obviously, how did that affect and impact you as you were sort of growing up? And, what was going on? How was it kind of bubbling up? Because this is what your people are going to want to hear. That it's like, oh my gosh, you mean to say that my anger or my triggered situations are as a result of unresolved issues? So let's talk about how it bubbled up in you.
So I definitely ruined so many relationships. I had so much anger and definitely authority issues. I eventually had a safe place to stay and ended up leaving there for no reason because of my authority issues. And because of that, I ended up putting myself in a really bad position and doing drugs. Luckily, I never got super addicted to anything, but I could have never been in that situation, period. But,
Mm,
I was my stepdad was military, so he is very authoritative and, so like just extreme authority just makes me want to buck completely. So yeah.
It's a bit like a dog. When a dog gets kicked, say by an old bald man, and then that dog will see another person that is an old bald man, they tend to flinch. And so even animals have that instinct of triggers. And I guess what this show is all about, it's about saying that your past doesn't need to depict your future.
Yes.
So whatever you have gone through, that was before. And I guess you know really well, Sammie, because you've been helping people, move through so many painful elements so that they can have a really crystal clear vision of their future. And you know only so well how people can get really blocked. They can get blocked as a result of, harboring all these unresolved issues. So let's go down the path of your transformation. And obviously now, because you are the person with firsthand experience that helps people to break through a lot of stuff that they're harboring so that they can come into their greatest version and have a vision of who they want to be and have a vision of, crystal clear clarity. And, let's look at how we can unpack it, how you release the layers and how you completely kind of tossed out all of that negative energy so you could stand in your power. So you discovered Reiki. So when you did Reiki, was that up close personally, or was it, was it virtual?
It was personally. So I actually ended up moving in with that person for a little while, and she was kind of a mentor to me and got me to start working on my inner child and different things like that. But again, I rebelled and left. So
Yeah.
I've been on the path to where I needed to be so many times. I remember when I was in church, I was very highly in church, had my own Bible study and everything for a long time. And I remember someone telling me that they saw me speaking to tons of people, to thousands of people. And I don't really like being the center of attention, but over the past, I would say 3 to 4 months, like becoming a speaker started being on my heart. So that path has just kept coming back to me.
Wow. So you kind of, it's almost like God puts this inspiration into us, right? It's, no matter what we're going through, if we're going through, some of the elements so that we can be a light to the world. And then we can have these, these flickers of inspiration put inside of us. And yours was to become a speaker. And obviously the healing journey that, obviously goes with a combination of, NLP, because you're now NLP trained, which is amazing. So congratulations. Your spiritual intuition. And of course, the experience in, the people that you are currently helping to move their stuck trauma and help them break free. So what's the first thing a person has to do? Like, obviously, firsthand yourself, but when you're healing and you're helping a person heal themselves, what is the first step that they need to take? Like, is it detoxification? Is it understanding where they're at? Can you talk me through that?
Really, I think it's understanding what is underneath everything. I always say that triggers are a good thing because triggers don't have to be something that upsets you or makes you angry or causes you to get in a fight. There is something underneath that is actually the problem. And we can use those things to help us get better, but we have to become more self-aware and actually find out what those problems are. You can't fix something if you don't know what needs to be fixed. So that's really where I start, is figuring out what's actually underneath. I ruined relationships and pushed people away forever. I wasn't doing that just because I wanted to or just because I was mean. I was doing that because I had been hurt and I was afraid of being loved. So when we start to figure out those things and start to understand ourselves more, we're better able to start to control those things.
Yeah, absolutely. You start to understand why you're feeling triggered, and I feel that when we do hold space for ourselves and we give ourselves that ability to be in that emotional space and not to beat ourselves up or regret it, but to say, hey, you know what? I'm feeling this way because there's so much uncertainty, or because I am in fear. Because a lot of people, they trigger off and they do life and they go round and around in this circle without coming to know what is causing it. So when we lift the lid off it, usually what happens is it like a detoxification. You were talking me through the detoxification process and how that can be a little bit painful. And I think that that's okay. It's okay to feel that pain when we're first looking into really resolving our issues. So how does that work? Like if they come to see you and they're doing a session, what does that detoxification look like, and what kind of questions are you asking them?
So really, first I'm going to figure out what the biggest issue is. Are you struggling with anger or negativity, or you're ruining relationships, sabotaging your job? And then from there, it's like, okay, what has happened to you in your life? What negative experiences have you possibly had? Different things like that. And when we start to talk about those things, which I believe it's good to go through those things, but I'm also, it's completely up to the person I'm working with if they actually want to share that or if they just want to keep that to themselves. But, it's easier for me if they share, they obviously have to share some, but, detail wise. But
Yes.
yeah, the more details I have, the more I can understand, like, hey, okay, you know, this, let me give you this insight into this. So it's a bit of like a detoxification where we're working through some of this stuff, and also insight to understand why that is happening, why that's going on.
Yeah, and quite often people are just symptomatic, and you would know this, and I guess you can correct me if I'm wrong about the specificity, or being specific. So if a person is coming in and they're really not they're not at their highest level, they're not playing their best life out, then the kind of specificity I know that we're looking for is, well, what specifically are you feeling? And those feelings then kind of get tracked to, well, what are you telling yourself? And then quite often it's not what's happening in the here and now, is it? It's if they're triggered with their relationships, if they're falling out with people, if they're having all of these specific symptoms, whatever it may be in their life, each to every person, it usually goes down a pipeline or a timeline to where they first felt those issues. And as I was saying to you before, it's like the subconscious that is, trying to protect and going, I'm not going to let this happen to you again. So I'm going to give you this memory, this flashback that's going to cause this trigger to protect you so you don't go further. So when we kind of get underneath that and then we clear it, what happens then? How did it impact you when you had obviously gone through this yourself and you found yourself detoxing from some of those old stories. How did it feel? What was the difference it made in your life?
It was a huge difference because a lot of my issues are around anger, whether it be anger at other people or anger at myself. Um, Most of it was anger. So being able to let that go, like I have more energy. I wasn't as tired anymore. My relationships were better. I felt better just in general. I was able to focus on things because when we're angry all the time, our brains aren't working right. We can't focus because we're worried about this other thing. So it was just really freeing and peaceful, I guess, and being able to focus on things that actually mattered and would make a difference rather than being stuck in the cycle of being angry over something.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And I note that you were saying to me that quite often people don't really have a clear vision of what they want. And one of the things that you help people do is to become really specific, like to build a vision, to create that really strong sense of what they want. So, can you take me through that? So if you were talking to me, helping me to build my strong vision, what are some of the things? How would you help me to kind of move forward so that I could create that strong vision and really have a sense of what I wanted rather than being blocked by all the stuff that's obviously, holding me back?
Well, first, I think it's important to work on our self-worth and self-love and gratitude because if you don't believe you're worthy, if you don't believe you can accomplish this thing, what does it matter? Everything else that you're doing. So that also, you're not going to be able to really get to what you actually want, your true self, higher self, however you want to call it. You can't actually get to that if you don't have self-worth because you're going to be placing limiting beliefs on yourself. So I think working through that and at least getting a little bit better on the self-worth and the self-love is a super important thing to do. And then realizing the things that we do have to be grateful for because things don't come like we want them to. They rarely come exactly like we ask for them. So sometimes you've really got to look at things and see, okay, you know what? I asked for this and technically I got that. I was listening to something one day and it said, think about what you wanted, like when you were younger or something like that. And I remember when I was a teenager, I'd see couples in the grocery store shopping with their kids. And I wanted that for some reason. That was like something I really wanted. And I thought about it and I was like, wait, I have that. Maybe not where exactly I want to be in life or exactly how I want things, but I have that in my life. So there's always things to be grateful for. And we've got to be able to see those things because if not, we're going to miss opportunities to actually get those things we want because it doesn't always come in a good experience. Sometimes we've got to go through a tougher experience. Sometimes something has to be broken away to make room for that new thing. So we really got to be sure of ourselves and be able to look at situations in a way where we can be grateful for them, no matter whether it seems good or bad.
That is so good. I mean, you wouldn't put someone in the police force without putting them through the training, or even when they go into army or they go into any kind of element, or a brain surgeon. Can you imagine putting a brain surgeon behind a knife without any training, without any learning, without anything at all? So we've really, the life lessons, what I'm hearing you say, are so imperative. And I believe too, just in that goal that you've shared right there is going to illuminate to people that, if you are going through a hard time in your life, you've got to be able to say, well, what is this meaning for me? How does this correlate with the person that I'm becoming, and what is it that I needed to be really kind of created for, so that I could be that best version of myself. And I'm hearing also that just in you being able to sit with that person and hold space for them and get them to become aware of what they're feeling, what is going on in their world, and then to go back and look at, well, this happened to me when I was a child, like your experience of being a 13-year-old girl and being abused and molested by your stepfather, and then not having that support, not having that, not being heard. I mean, everybody's got their own experiences, but it's how it impacts us. And of course, when you can get to the level of where you are now, where you've been able to kind of like do the clearing, what is the big thing, do you think, that happens when you're clearing? I mean, I know for, with NLP, we're clearing from, like you say, specificity. They don't always need to say, well, this is, my dog ran away with the cat and got run over by the neighbour down the road. But sometimes it's about, well, understanding a specific situation that happened that really impacted their life and caused them to hold all of this pain in their body of whatever that is, and then as they understand it, then kind of releasing it. So when you were able to release, all of this trauma and, the elements, do you feel like you had to go through a forgiveness? Did you have to go through a almost like a reconciliation again with those, those people that were involved, as in within your own spiritual self? Or was it more about your spirit, with the higher divine, as you talked about in the beginning, God, just being able to clear that? Can you kind of talk me through that?
So when I was younger, I definitely did use like writing letters and not sending them and things like that to work through a lot of it. But now with the like 5 years that led up to this, it's been more just doing the work in myself, really, and forgiving myself, letting it go within myself, really. That was the biggest part of all of it. Was I was angry and then I do something dumb, so I'd be more angry because then I'm angry at myself. So it's just a cycle that never ends at all.
Because it goes round and around and round. So, okay, so I noticed that in your program and what you're offering, you are firstly getting people to firstly identify. So, guys, identifying, like what Sammie has said, the way that you're feeling, like the anger or whatever that is, and then being able to kind of track back and appreciate that your subconscious mind is really wanting to protect you from that mistreatment. And I see that in your service, you are really about removing the emotional blocks that, are often caused by mistreatment. The way a person has been treated. You helped a woman recently where she was kind of repeating and doing life about the past of how she'd been treated. Can you talk us through how she let go of that and your workbook, and what was in that workbook that helped her be able to kind of release that?
Well, I think a lot of times our self-worth is connected a lot to what we believe about ourselves. Well, not even what we believe, but what that dumb voice in our head is telling us to believe about ourselves. But also society and our families have placed limiting beliefs on us, sometimes not even trying to be harmful or in a negative way. And it's really hard to let go of those things to say my parents are wrong. Like if you trusted your parents and believed in them your whole life, it's really hard to say they're wrong. So a lot of times it's like multiple layers of working through self-worth. But yeah, so we realized that a lot of it was from the way she was treated from her family and by them. And really talk through that and work through that. And in my workbook, a lot of it is about, you know, understanding how it's affecting you now and
Yeah.
how to release that where it's affecting you today. You know, we may not realize that the reason we believe we can't do this is because somebody said it to us when we were in third grade. And it just, for some reason, stuck with us, you know. So there's a lot underneath it all. And
Yeah, it's where we've been programmed, isn't it? It's where the
mhm,
conditioning began. You know,
yep.
it's how we know. And quite often, if we ask ourselves, well, who am I? Who am I?
Mhm,
And how do I see myself through my eyes? And how do I see myself through somebody else's eyes?
mhm,
And because we tend to look at ourselves through the view of how we perceive other people see us, that's where the conditioning, you know, like I
mhm,
remember being a little 8-year-old girl that was told that I was a daydreamer by my year 3 teacher. And then the
mhm,
kids all making fun of me with that. So, you know, a lot of the feelings of, I guess, like you talk about isolation or feeling like you've been ganged up on. And then because you're playing that over and over, you don't realize it, but then you're attracting it. And we're
yep.
going to talk about manifestation in just a moment. So stay tuned, guys, because we're getting into the juicy stuff in terms of manifesting, because manifesting, as you were talking me through before, and I love the fact that you talked about how if we're not specific and we don't have that visualization and know what we want, then the universe may give us what it thinks we want. And I tell you what, I could do a whole podcast on that topic in itself. That people
Yes.
can, yeah, people can wind up being in the worst positions, but then you can see, like, for example, someone very close to me, I can see how that person has manifested it. And even though
Mhm,
it looks like what's going on around this person is really bad, and maybe it is really bad, but you can pull a seed from out of it of, you know what, maybe they're kind of enjoying that. Or if that wasn't happening, maybe they would perceive they were living their best life, but they didn't get specific about it. You know, it
mhm.
reminds me of that show Bewitched. You'll be way
Yeah.
too young to remember it maybe, but the little baby witch, she would start practicing by twitching her nose, but then she'd want a toy elephant, but she'd get a real elephant.
Mhm.
So a real
Yeah.
elephant would suddenly appear in the room. And it's kind of like very, very similar. And, you know, so we do have to be careful what we wish for.
Mhm.
And, you know, if you feel like you wish to have a really lazy, carefree life, be careful because you might end up in a hospital bed.
Yeah.
Or if you want to be served, by all these people and looked after, you might end up again in a place or a facility where people are serving you and it's not exactly how you wanted it. Well, actually, I was thinking of a castle, not a care facility or a
Yeah.
rehabilitation. So
Yeah.
we do have to be really, really careful. So
Mhm.
let's talk about your clarity of how you get really clear with your clients, with helping them to manifest what they want.
Well, first, like I said, we get past all of that, what other people expect, the limiting beliefs that have been placed on us, and really get in touch with yourself because sometimes we think we want things, but they're really what somebody else has been telling us we wanted for all of our lives or something like that. So you really have to get in touch with yourself. And I really see it as a spiritual connection, getting in touch with your higher self, your soul, what's deep within you, what really calls you. Like, I don't think your soul is going to be called to do something that you're like horrible at. So, like, what are you good at and you love and everything. So, figuring out those little details kind of helps us start to create a picture of what they want. And then, when you say, oh, well, I want a house. Okay, well, like, how many bedrooms do you want? How big do you want it to be? Go like, what do you want? How do you want it to be decorated? All of that. Getting them to go into detail and asking those questions to pull more out of them to where they can actually see that clear picture. Because, if you're working on a car and you don't know what's wrong or you don't know what part to get, you're not going to be able to do anything with it. So if you don't have a clear picture, you can't work towards that. And that's another thing. We have to work towards it. But
Wow.
yeah, I mean, we have to really, get deeper with it. So I keep asking.
I love what you said. I love that. If you don't know what part you need to fix and you've got a broken refrigerator, but you don't know what the part is, you don't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily have to go out and buy a brand new fridge. You may
Yeah.
need a little screwdriver or a screwdriver to actually put something back together again. So you need to know what the problem is. So
Mm-hmm.
what's blocking you from being able to get to where you are.
Mm-hmm.
Then you become more specific about if that block is then gone, what does that look like for you? And what's that with the frequency? How important is that frequency and energy for them to step into that?
So that is one of the biggest reasons I like to go so detailed into it and so deep into it, is because you need to start having that energy vibrating at that level to have those things in your life. I see it on a spiritual and a scientific level, because we're training our brains to start focusing on those things, to start working towards those things. If we're having these super deep visualizations and really seeing those things, our brain sees that as if it's already happened. So if we start stepping into that and being that person and keeping that energy with us, do a 5-minute visualization every morning and carry that energy with you throughout your day. Doing things like that just really make a huge difference. If I always talk about when people are playing the victim, that's what they keep drawing to themselves. And that it's the same thing. If you're going to focus on the bad, focus on, oh, well, my boyfriend's always cheat on me, you're going to keep attracting those type of people. So we've got to focus on those things and keep those things on our minds so we can stay in that energy and not just fall back out of it.
That's amazing. So you've really got to be able to focus in on it. And I guess too, when you've got a coach, someone asking you the questions, it kind of elicits those feelings anyway, doesn't it? So you start to tap into, what does that feel like? What does that look like? What does that sound like? What have you removed? And then you obviously encourage them to write as well. So
Mm-hmm.
how does that writing piece come into play? So what can they actually do? Do they write where they are? Do they write it in the present tense? What does that look like?
So I like to do present tense. I think that's the best because that's who we want to be. And who wants to wait? Everybody's somewhat impatient. We all want what we want now. I mean, that's the best way to have it. So if we start being that person, we get that quicker. So, that's, I guess, the biggest way I see it. Um, we just gotta go for it, really.
Yeah.
And when we're writing down, is something we can go back and look at. And writing it in the present tense, like I said, it just makes it more real in your mind, because you're not saying, oh, well, I'm going to be. You're saying, I am. You're actually telling your brain, hey, this is what you're going to be. This is what you're going to do. These are the things we're working towards. So when you're doing that, you're focusing the spiritual energy and your mind on everything that you're trying to get. So I I I just love writing in general. And I think, like, I guess for me, a lot of spiritual stuff is movement. I recently started just feeling, just not super recently, probably like 6 months ago, started feeling a little disconnected. And I started incorporating like dance and movement. And that made me
Yes.
realize kind of one reason I like the writing is because we're actually moving that energy while we're doing it.
Oh, yeah, I'm so glad you said that. This is something that I have been practicing myself. I know music. I look at my father and he's really young compared to his age. And I understand that because he dances and he's involved in music, that music, that vibration, and there's a few magical things that happen with movement is, firstly, you're moving your body, so you're shifting the energy. So I love that you have, really brought that to the surface, because moving your body is probably the biggest piece of magic to shifting and feeling differently in yourself. And of course, playing music that you love, that really resonates, it's kind of lifting the vibe, but you're also moving out of your head, aren't you? So rather than being
Yeah.
locked in that head space, you kind of letting that go, and then and just moving. And I mean, some people might go, well, what if I can't dance? Well, just move. You don't have to dance. Just move your body side to side. Now, can I have permission to just go through your program and, some of the key elements that I have got here that obviously you shared with me backstage? Is that okay for me to do that as
Yeah,
we
definitely.
close? So, okay, so number one, from the lady herself, you've got a clear, unresolved emotional blocks in order to be able to create that rock solid foundation of healing. So the first thing that happens when you come into Sammie's program, and you can do this virtually. Now, maybe I might have to just eliminate any elephants in the room here, because people might be going, how can you do that when you're not even in the same room as myself? But what are you relying on, and what does that other person, even if they don't believe it, what do they have to know about it that actually works, and where that power comes from? Is it permission that's being given to you? Is there some kind of a magical, light that comes booming down from above? Can you talk me through that?
So definitely permission. And I use my intuition a lot. Of course, it's different when you're not right there with that person's energy, but we're all connected with this universal consciousness and universal energy, God, whatever you want to call it. We all have a connection to that. And I feel like I work through that. And I'm able to reach people in that way. With Reiki, we see it as, it is a type of energy. So if we know where to direct that energy, it knows what it's doing, and it goes there and does what it needs to do. And sometimes it's not even what we think needs to be done, but it knows what it needs to do. And that's just the way I look at it, as, it just is, the energy is there. And of course, I think, somebody that was resistant to it, it would be a lot harder probably, because they'd also be resistant to that energy being shared. So it's definitely something that I make sure people understand beforehand, because
Yeah.
I have had people be like, oh, well, how can you do that from a distance? You can't do, you have to be there to do Reiki. And it's
Yeah.
energy. So if you know where to send it, it can go there.
And you can't see air, but air is, and air brings oxygen. And there is, whether you believe in a higher power or you don't believe in a higher power, the fact is that energy is emotion in motion. And, a part of a really good mentor, spiritual healer's role anyway is to be able to hold space for that person regardless of where they are. So if they're skeptical, I find sometimes it's the skeptical ones that are quite often the best, because you're not, it's not about forcing them to believe in something, but it's about giving them the freedom to experience and to perhaps open themselves up. And I'll quite often say to people, well, if you don't believe that you are in a position where you can release so much from your life right now, may I say, with everything you've done, everything you've been through, what have you got to lose by being open to it? So quite often we do have to give them the freedom to have that skepticalness. Not that that's a word, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So number one, Sammie will detox the energy. And yes, she can do this whether you are sitting in front of her, or perhaps if you are simply, sharing with her your intention. And there may be elements of like a picture. I've heard people I know Joe Dispenza does it, like a picture of the person and, sending that energy to them. So detoxification is number one. And perhaps that, using Reiki symbols for self-healing. So what do you suggest that people can do with those symbols, for self-healing? So if our audience was going to say, well, I'd love to be able to heal myself right now, have you got any tips that they could, bring so that they could practice that with themselves?
So even before I was a Reiki practitioner, I'm an empath, so I like to ground myself and make sure I'm good in the morning before I go anywhere. So I would actually visualize each of the chakras and go through and picture like a spinning ball of light and spin it until I felt it was good in alignment. To do that, you really just need to be, kind of in tune with your own energy. I believe that, you don't necessarily have to have someone else to do that for you. It may be easier, who knows? You may just naturally, be able to do it. But yeah, we all definitely can access that. And I think just getting kind of more in tune with that energy inside of yourself helps you to know where you need to balance and what needs to be fixed. And also, they all relate to different types of trauma, different types of illnesses and pains. So you can kind of even look at your life and be like, oh, wait, wow, that really makes sense. I definitely have with like the health issues and stuff I have. I'm like, okay, wow, that happened, and this is happening now. So the trauma gets stored in our bodies sometimes because that energy gets trapped or moving the wrong direction, and all we've got to do is get that back on track.
Yeah, so pull it out of your body and kind of reset it, and then bring it in. And also the chakras. We've got the crown chakra. We've got the third eye chakra.
Yep.
We've got the throat chakra. We've got the heart chakra. We've got the inner core. What would you call it? The gut chakra?
The solar plexus.
Yeah, the solar plexus, the tailbone around that area. And where else? Are there any other chakras?
So you have the root,
The root chakra.
And then, oh my gosh, why is my brain not working right? Yeah, that.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
root chakra is actually a really important one, because if you concentrate on that around the base of your spine and around the pelvic area, this is your, I call it your codes of prosperity, which is your sexuality and your self-love and your self-worth, and all around that area, you know, just to, you know, create that beautiful golden light, and as Sammie says, have it moving in that beautiful direction that really aligns with your, I guess, with your GPS, what aligns with your feeling. And of course, you know, then you move through to, you've released everything, and then you moved into the confidence building, the reinstating of their self-worth, the reinstating of their self-love, the understanding of who they are, and then the gratitude. And of course, finally, it is what we've been discussing, which is, well, let's create that beautiful vision for who you want to become. So I'm going to ask you one last question before we close the show. And it's a question I love to ask everyone, because as we kind of get into things, quite often people go, oh, I wished I had said this, and I wished I had have shared that. But if you could share anything, and it's something that you would love your listeners to hear about moving them forward, making a change that may be something they just need to hear. It doesn't have to be anything profound, but something that you would love to share, so that that person who's listening, that's praying for that clearance of trauma, to be able to step into their best life, to be able to live their best life, what words would you give to that person?
That life is happening for you, not to you. We get to create all this and control all of this. You just have to step into yourself and into that power to be able to do that. And you can change everything. Nothing, like, life's always going to have its ups and downs. You know, it's not going to be happy, rainbow and sunshine all the time. There's definitely some times where things get rough, but the key is feeling those feelings without judgment and letting them go, and just working through that instead of just ignoring it and holding on to it. And so, yeah, when you just step into yourself and realize that you have the power to make all of this what you want, then things are going to completely change for you.
That is amazing. So, yeah, you are the master of your own destiny.
Yes.
So you can create anything. You have the mastery in your own hands. What amazing words. Now, we are going to put Sammie's links into our show notes so that you can contact Sammie for a, you know, a specialized intuitive treatment, for a healing session, even for her workbook. She's got this incredible workbook that she will be able to share with you. So we will drop the link in there, Sammie. And what can I say other than, you know, thank you for your generosity, the ability that you've been able to be so transparent on this show, and the gift that you are giving to others by doing that.
Thank you so much for having me. I feel super blessed to get to do this, really. You know, I get to turn all my trauma and pain into something good, and that's amazing. So I appreciate everyone that, you know, listens and supports or anything, because you're giving me a chance to share my light and turn that bad into good.
Awesome. Turn your pain into power. Thank you, Sammie.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Woohoo!
Thank you.
Our show where we have explored through this various topic along with all the exciting new topics that we bring every week to enhance your personal mastery of excellence. Now, I'd love you to do me a favor. In fact, be part of the Legacy 1 million that I have in the vision for 2028. If you know someone who really would benefit from this recording, from this episode, please share it with them. And when you subscribe, you get notified every week of our episode as soon as it drops. So let's do that legacy thing. Let's share, let's care, let's enrich. And I look forward to bringing you another week of the most enriching content. So until next time, stay inspired, stay awesome, and keep on mastering your excellence.